All right, Nigeria's Foreign Minister Yusuf Tugar and U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Kurt Campbell co-chaired the 6th round of the US-Nigeria Binational Commission BNC in Abuja, April 29th to the 30th. Established in 2010, the BNC is the premier platform of official engagement between the governments of the United States and Nigeria to expand cooperation and advance shared goals and democratic values. This year's Binational Commission built on the strong foundation agreed during the January 23rd, 2024 meeting between President Bola Tinubu and Secretary of State Anthony Blinken in Abuja, as well as the momentum from the last BNC held in Washington, D.C. in February 2020. This year featured 5 working groups covering a range of issues to advance the mutual interests of the U.S. and Nigeria. Today, we're focusing on my favorite topic, technology. And we have, happy to have in the studio, Will Stevens, Consul General, U.S Consulate, Lagos, Nigeria. Good morning to you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks.
Great to have you here on the show. So you've been very bullish on technology and advancement in Nigeria. Can you, I guess, discuss the highlights of the discussions on technology and the digital aspect of the binational?
Of course. And I think I just want to give a bit of a framework of why we do this binational commission.
Yeah.
Nigeria is one of our key partners around the world. It is a country with which we enjoy deep and broad relations across a variety of sectors, which means almost all aspects of the U.S. government are interested in partnering with Nigeria. So the BNC gives a chance for all those U.S. government agencies to come out here. We had something like 18 agencies represented at a senior level to come and talk to their Nigerian counterparts. Security, law enforcement, military, people-to-people, health, tech, commerce, all there to engage. And so at one meeting, I remember sitting there, the foreign minister is across from us with his team, and there are 9 agencies just interested in the tech sector. So it's really awesome. And it gives us a chance to come together and touch base and say, what are we doing as a government? How are we supporting one another? What can we be doing better moving forward? So in this session, our Deputy Secretary of State came in. He's an Asia hand. He spent a lot of time working on our relations with India, Taiwan, Singapore, Korea. And he said, we need to be highlighting and focusing on tech. So he drove us to have a conversation specifically about technology. And then he made several kind of key announcements at the session. One, we're going to be hosting together with Nigeria a seminar or conference on AI in July here in Lagos.
Great.
Yep, really cool.
Yeah.
Then we're going to host a tech-focused specific binational commission in Washington, D.C. in October. And 3, he invited the foreign minister to come to Washington, and we expect him to be there quite soon, to continue the conversation, to talk about how we can put in place the types of things and solidify what's already happening and identify some steps forward.
Awesome. Now, you were at the Lagos Business School earlier this week. I think it was on Monday. You gave a speech. You had a fireside chat on, I guess, thriving in the digital age. Can you give us some excerpts on what you talked about?
Sure. So we talked about what we're calling the digital transformation with Africa. This is President Biden's kind of key way we talk about our conversation with Africa in the digital space. And it's important to say the digital transformation with Africa, not for Africa, right? This is not an assistance program. It's about working together as we move into the digital economy, as we talk about the AI revolution. And so we talked about those 3 pillars of the DTA. There's an acronym because it's the U.S. government.
Of course.
Which is infrastructure, working together to build out the digital infrastructure, which Nigeria has a leading place, right? You have some of the fastest internet in the world in Lagos, but not the rest of the country. And so how do we move that infrastructure to the rest of the people so that the 220 million Nigerians can benefit from the high-speed internet that Meta and Google have landed in Lagos and Akwa Ibom? Secondly, it's about people, training people, getting our companies who are already committed to supporting Nigeria's kind of digital revolution and committed to training tech workers and ensuring that they're working together. So that's training. And then the third one is about the enabling environment, putting in place those regulations and laws and frameworks that will allow the digital revolution to happen. And Nigeria, again, a leader in that space. So much good laws on the books. Now it's about getting the regulations in place and keeping those conversations going that help form things like the Startup Act and the Data Privacy Act that helped create those frameworks, now making sure that they become actualized.
Awesome. Now, we were looking at data for the first quarter of the year. Nigeria led the way in terms of funding for tech startups, along with Kenya, Egypt, South Africa. How can startups in the tech space, I guess, collaborate to access U.S. markets, for instance?
Yeah, so we see that Nigeria has been the leader in that space for the last many years, and they continue to do so. And I think it's because of a couple of things. One, many of these companies are directly related to members of the diaspora. right? So you have people going and studying in the United States, working in the tech space in the United States, and then they come back here, tap into the talent in Nigeria, and they're financing networks in the United States. We've seen several key venture capital firms come out here, and incubators come. So Techstars, Y Combinator both have offices here in Lagos, and they're running kind of incubation programs for startups. And we believe that that is driving more success. And I'm a big believer in business that success begets success, right? When you see a company prosper, when you see someone have a successful exit, then everyone else starts to look over the fence and say, what am I going to do to get into that space? How can I benefit from that profits? And it's not just tech. We had an incredible exit just recently, Maven Records and Kupanda, in the creative space, right, to Universal. That's a big win.
We covered that.
It's a big win.
It's big news, yeah.
It's big news in the creative space. Someone actually doing an exit and making some serious money, that is already driving interest. And I'm getting calls often about what can we be doing in creative space, where are there opportunities, who should we be connecting with? So success begets success, and it drives more interest.
And in terms of technology, boosting the bilateral ties between the U.S. and Nigeria, how can that come about?
Yeah, so the U.S. government is trying to do a little bit. So we have the Development Finance Corporation, DFC, has several kind of funding mechanisms in place with banks here in Nigeria to allow anything from very early stage micro financing to supporting $10 million loans through Access Bank. So DFC has put about $500 million in loan guarantees to banks in Nigeria to support small, medium enterprises up to mid-scale enterprises. Typically, DFC, which is an IFI, is doing $500 million loans or $50 million loans to big companies, big balance sheets. These are about creating that SME space. And we're trying to do that to catalyze. Right. I think the role of government is catalytic. It's about showcasing kind of the areas where the private sector can come, because what we do is just a drop in the bucket to the money that the private sector can bring in.
I got to ask you about chasing tech innovation while addressing infrastructure challenges. Mm-hmm. So Arise News was in Abuja for the Digital Economy Ministry's AI workshop.
Yeah.
I was live on air, broadcasting here to the morning show, and unfortunately the lights went out. So it sparked this debate as to, can we walk and chew gum at the same time? You don't have power, you're chasing AI. How do you see that dynamic, that debate?
It's absolutely critical, right? We had Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, was in Lagos, right? The only place he stopped in his sort of global tour on Africa was in Lagos. He came to the house, and the first thing he talked about was power. Right? There is no AI without electricity, without power generation and clean energy. So the U.S. government has been working in Nigeria for many years to increase generation capacity. And we have some interesting initiatives specifically focused on clean energy demand, creating demand for those things. So increasing imports of the clean tech and then creating demand for those things. And we're seeing it grow, right? You're seeing more and more solar powers pop up, largely because the price of diesel is so high. And working with the government, right here in Lagos, we have a plan with the Lagos state government on assessing kind of what are the energy needs going to be in Lagos and how can that create opportunities for investment. So we're helping. I think it's an area for a lot more focus, and it's going to take a village.
So that's energy. I want to ask you about education, right? I mean, I don't even think I should be mentioning Silicon Valley. That's the cream of the crop. Maybe I take India, which is an emerging market like Nigeria. Their tech pipeline is just fantastic, right? And so what would your advice be to the educational space facilities here in Nigeria to try to get our youth ready for the jobs of tomorrow in tech and the likes?
Again, I think success begets success, right? When you talk about tech education, you talk about the tech stack, right? First is learning how to use devices. Right. And then the kids that start to use the devices, you have kids, I have kids.
Not yet, I'm getting there.
They're smarter than I am on tech, right? Because they use it every day in ways I never would dream of. Sometimes for good, sometimes for bad.
Certainly.
So you get technology into the hands of kids, and you include it in the classroom. That's the first stage. And we have organizations like USAID and a whole slew of NGOs and others working in the education sector in that. Secondly, it's about training tech workers. And we are hand in hand with the Nigerian government, NITDA and others, on the 3 million tech-trained people. This is a commitment that Minister Tijani has made.
Right.
And we're trying to kind of corral our U.S. companies to support that. So many of our U.S. companies have made commitments to train tech workers, and they've done it. Microsoft, Amazon Web Services, Cisco, Oracle, Meta, they're all committing. So what we've committed at the BNC to do is create an inventory of who's doing what in what areas and where are the gaps. right? Work with the Nigerian government and say, okay, no one's training on this particular skill set. Is there an American company that can help? Is there a place that the Nigerian government or our government can fill in the gaps? So it's about kind of bringing it all together, those three legs of government, people, and private sector.
Got to ask you about gender and technology. And one of the things I've always loved about the United States, whenever a delegation of the U.S. goes to another country, and you have either President Biden or Obama, who else on one side, and the others, there's always a diverse sort of officials, right? You got Janet Yellen and so on and so forth. So our tech gender gap, there was a survey carried out by one campaign at the Center for Global Development. 30% of 93 surveyed firms, only 30% of those 93 are owned by women. And then 33% of the 30% employed no women at all, right? And so as far as Nigeria's gender inclusivity rank, it's 139 out of 153. The US has been a leader in gender issues across the board. How can we improve on that here for technology?
So it's again, getting technology into the hands of children at an early age.
And girls.
Right? And girls, absolutely. This is something you can do and do well. And I see it here all the time. We have female founders that are US-based now companies, US companies that are Lagos-based but incorporated in the US.
Yeah.
Shuttlers is a great example. This is a female-owned company that essentially is like Uber for buses. I remember sitting at WIMBIZ, right, in Lagos a year ago and looking out and seeing the MD of Google West Africa, the MD of Meta, the MD of Microsoft, all women, Nigerian women. So the women are there, and they can play those roles. So it's a matter of empowering them. The U.S. government tries. So I'm leading a delegation in late June to the U.S. for an organization or for an event called Select Tech, focused on women founders, helping them to create business storefronts in the U.S. for their tech organizations that are based here. We support things like the Academy of Women Entrepreneurs to develop women. We have an exchange program called Tech Women, focused on taking those early stage organizations and getting them kind of mentors in the United States. And I'll tell you, the capital's there. Venture capital is interested in women-led businesses because those businesses tend to be more profitable and more successful in the long term and more stable. So they look for and try to pick women-led businesses. So the opportunities are there. It's just a matter about building up that pipeline, as you said.
Amen to that. Just one more question for you, Will. How do you perceive the diaspora? I think you may have mentioned this in your earlier answer, though. But as far as getting more investments in tech into Nigeria, what's their role?
Diaspora is already the leading edge. Right? So many of the VC firms that are based here, so many of the startups, the unicorns, are led by members of the diaspora, people who've gone and worked in the United States, who've studied it in the United States, and they come back. That's the benefit of studying in the United States, right? You go, you build those deep connections with our academic institutions, you work there for a little bit, then you come back, you have ties there, you can access capital there, and you're trusted, right? Because people are like, oh, this guy went to my school, or I've worked with them, I know them, they know my friends. So it is a leading part of what's happening. And one of the other things we announced at the BNC is President Biden has what he calls the Advisory Commission of Engagement with the African Diaspora. It's a commission of, I think, 11 members. 2 of them are Nigerian. And people like Viola Davis, famous actors, people in academia, investment sector, sports. The entire commission is coming to Lagos in July. We'll be hosting them here, talking about how we can kind of continue to catalyze investment from the diaspora and get engagement with the diaspora into Nigeria and more broadly Africa.
Hey, we really do appreciate what the Biden administration is doing to try to get improve tech in Nigeria. And we thank you so much as well for joining us on the show. Will Stevens, U.S. Consul General, U.S. Consulate in Lagos, Nigeria. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks.